The healthy versions of foods that you're eating in your diet are what are holding you back from accomplishing your goals. Let's talk about it. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Today, I wanted to jump on and talk about ultra processed foods and the ultra processed foods that are marketed to you as healthy and why they are holding you back from getting to your goals. So first, let's talk about what an ultra processed food is and what that looks like so you know how to identify it and you can start figuring out where it is in your current diet. Now, ultra processed foods are the foods that take a tremendous amount of processing to get them ready for market. They usually have a very long ingredient list filled with things that you don't recognize or very long words that you've never seen before. They usually come in a package that can last for a really long time without expiring. And in your grocery store, they're generally found in the middle of the grocery store in all the aisles. Now, these foods are generally engineered, and I say engineered very intentionally, for taste and convenience, not for your health. Even if the package is marketed as a healthy option or healthy alternative. And this is where it can get really confusing if you go into the grocery store and think you're making the right choices. You feel like you're always eating healthy, but you never see the fat come off on the scale. You never feel like your body's changing. Your energy is always poor, all of those things. This is one of the options or reasons that might be causing that. Now, I do want to caveat this before we go any further that food kind of lives on a spectrum, and we're not ixnaying all processed food. It does kind of go between like no processing, minimal processed, and then ultra processed. And there's alternatives and options for each individual category. But today we're really focusing in on the ultra processed side, which is about as far away from the natural products as you could get. We'll also touch base a little bit on minimally processed and processed foods just to make sure that you feel empowered to make the right decisions for you in your diet and your health. But let's talk about why ultra processed foods are so detrimental to your goals and your health. First of all, these foods are actually engineered to be addicting and be able to, or for you to be able to overeat. So again, they have whole teams that do market research and science around the taste, how it feels in your mouth, the packaging, the smell, all of those things. And the goal or the sole purpose of the food is to be so palatable to you that you can continue to eat it way beyond when you would normally be full. A perfect example of this is potato chips. So in essence, potato chips are potatoes. They just have a bunch of other stuff in it. But you could easily sit down and demolish an entire bag of potato chips. Whereas if you were to think about eating 2 whole potatoes, that would be a pretty significant challenge, especially if you weren't loading it up with all sorts of different toppings. Now, here's the crazy thing about that. A bag of potato chips, we're talking a bigger bag, not the little fun size ones, but a normal bag of potato chips, it's not 1 or 2 potatoes. In most cases, it's around 6 to 8 whole potatoes in a bag of potato chips. Let that sink in. This is how powerful engineering the food is. You can literally take 8 potatoes, modify them, and make it easy to eat. I would challenge you to go out and try to eat even half of that in one sitting and not be miserable of whole potatoes. So not only are these foods engineered to overeat, and they make them extremely palatable so you can just keep eating and keep eating and keep eating. In most cases, they also are pretty devoid of nutrients compared to whole food options. Meaning they just don't have the micronutrients, the fiber, the protein, those other super critical components to them that help us on our health and fitness journey. Instead, they lack those things. They're easy to overeat, and realistically, they're just not helping you in any way, shape, or form. And here's the kicker with it all. Ultra processed foods also encompass a lot of the marketed healthy options. Things like protein bars and low fat snacks and high fiber snacks and things like that. While these aren't always a net negative, they are something to watch, because if you are consuming mostly those kind of foods, you're still going to fall prey to essentially the engineering of these foods and end up overeating. They're not as filling, so while you might still get some more protein than you would in a normal candy bar, a protein bar still isn't going to fill you up the same way. And while the low fat option might seem like it's less calories, you end up eating more anyways because it doesn't fill you up, it doesn't have all the nutrients, all those things. So you got to kind of watch out for these things and really pay attention to how your body responds when you're making these quote unquote healthy alternative choices to see, is this the right choice for me? Again, we want to find foods that not only give us the micro and macronutrients we need, but also keep us full and make sure that we don't have the urges to kind of binge later in the day or have large energy spikes and energy crashes or upset digestion. All these things are important to monitor when you're including these foods in your diet. So now that we've kind of gone over what is an ultra processed food, where do you find it, where there's some sneaky health options, what do you do about it? And why is it so important to know this, especially with the goal of fat loss or bettering your health? Well, like I've kind of talked about, these foods are incredibly easy to overeat. So even if they're marketed as a low calorie option, chances are it's not keeping you full for very long. So now you're going to be eating again sooner than you normally would. You're going to be pushed into options that, again, are similar in the fact that they are convenient, they taste really good, but they don't fill you up. So by the end of the day, even though you were eating all low calorie options, you end up way over what the calories you should be eating just because of the frequency you have to eat because you're not full. There's less nutrients in these foods in most cases. So if you're trying to build muscle and lose fat, you're not feeding the muscle building part of the process as well as you could be with whole foods. You're really just pleasing your palate is all that's happening. You're just making yourself happy by eating a tasty food. You also tend to see a lot more energy spikes and crashes, which again, not only is that uncomfortable and kind of miserable to live your day like that, but when you hit those energy crashes is tend to be when you have all those cravings for those sugary foods or when you tend to binge on things you know aren't the right option. You get to the point of the day where you feel super tired and all you can think about is that piece of chocolate that's sitting in your pantry. Well, that's a really hard mental hurdle to overcome and just be able to willpower through, especially if it's happening later in your day. So we want to set ourselves up for success and not have those energy crashes so we don't have to make those decisions. Now, what do you want to do? What is the solution to this? Because obviously if we go into the grocery store, this makes up a large portion of the grocery store. And the answer is pretty simple. We stick to whole natural foods. These are the foods on the outside edge of the grocery store, usually the ones that are in a cooler of some sort and won't last for very long. They're the single or just couple ingredient type foods that you generally have to prepare and cook for your family or yourself. These are things like meat products, so anything that is derived from an animal really without a bunch of extra ingredients on it. Eggs, meat, fish, that kind of thing. Any kind of produce, fruits, veggies, all good options. And then even like our energy sources, our kind of starchier carbohydrates. You have potatoes, sweet potatoes, quinoa, beans, rice. Those are all great options to fill your plate out. And you can make a ton of variety of dishes with those foods, especially if you implement different seasonings and spices, and if you're keeping an eye on it, different sauces of what's included in the sauce. You can do nuts, seeds, that kind of thing. So really think about it as like, could I hunt or catch this food? Could I pick this food out of the ground or off of a tree? And or does this food come from an animal pretty naturally? If you can say yes to those questions, very likely it's a very good option for you to include in your daily meal. Now, I do know that it's probably pretty unrealistic for most of us to just say, okay, now you're going to sit down and cook and prepare all these single ingredient meals every day for the rest of your life. I mean, that does take time. It really isn't as convenient as some of these prepackaged foods. So there's some ways around that, but I'll talk about those in a second. What's most important is thinking about the ratio in which you eat whole natural foods versus processed foods. And what I like to tell most people is you want to aim for about 80% of your food coming from whole natural sources and about 20% of your food coming from minimally or low processed foods. Again, trying to stay as close to that whole natural side of things as possible. The minimally processed foods, or kind of like the better processed foods, are going to include things like your flavored yogurts, your beef jerky, prepackaged meats and things like that that have minimal processing but are already kind of prepared. So think as close as I can get to whole natural, and then just a sprinkle of the ultra processed stuff, because it's not realistic to say never have it, right? But the more we can reduce that and the more we can lean into the whole natural side of things, the easier it becomes to not only manage our health and fitness goals, but also manage the overeating that comes with the ultra processed foods. So how do I make it easier to eat whole natural foods? Well, really there's two things you need to think about. One is your plan. So you need to have a plan, especially in the beginning. It's not going to happen if you don't plan it out. So what am I going to have for dinner and lunch and breakfast each and every day? And buy the ingredients that you need for that so they're on hand. Now, the bonus to that would be to prepare them ahead of time. So this is where we talk about meal prep. For me personally, I like to meal prep my food for Monday through Friday every Sunday. So I spend probably 2 hours cooking on Sunday, and then I don't have to really cook for the remainder of the week. Now, other people and some of my clients, what they'll do is they'll meal prep on Sunday for a couple days, then they might meal prep again on Wednesday for the next couple days. Really, you have to factor in what's your lifestyle, when do you have that availability, things like that. But I do highly recommend getting into some kind of prepping practice, especially for meals when you know you're going to be away, i.e. lunch. Most of us have to go to work every day. You're not going to be home. So we need to have something that we can have so we're not making poor decisions over the lunch break. So again, I want you to sit down on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever, the day before or the day of you're going to the grocery store, write out what's my plan for this week, what foods do I need, make sure we buy all those foods, and then bonus points if you prep some of your meals, especially knowing when it's going to be really inconvenient for you to cook those throughout the week. If you can do that, it will make it incredibly easy comparatively to what you're doing now to actually hit your health and fitness goals. I can't overstate this enough that when people start eating whole natural foods, prioritize protein, which I know I haven't talked about a lot in this video, but prioritize protein, whole natural foods, have a plan for it, and have it prepared, it just makes everything a lot more simple and a lot more easy, and they feel a lot better about the process. It's not the constant roller coaster ride of, oh, I ate out, now I feel like I gained a bunch of fat, so I'm going to restrict myself, but now I'm super hungry, and now that chocolate sounds really good, and I don't have the willpower to stop myself, so now I'm going to overeat again, and now I'm stringing together multiple days of just eating these foods that I know don't work me towards my goal. So it's super important to go through and make sure you're getting those whole natural foods and prioritizing doing that as many times throughout the day as possible. Here is your actionable plan to make this happen. Again, first, figure out what days you're going to go to the grocery store. If it's multiple times a week, if it's once a week, it doesn't really matter, but figure out what that day is. The day before or the day after, you're going to create a plan for the week of what you're going to have to eat, and in that plan is mostly going to be whole natural foods. Again, things that you could hunt or catch in nature that come from animals, so eggs, that kind of dairy products, that kind of thing, or that you could grow or pick out of a garden, out of a tree, something like that. Whole natural foods. That compromises, or that makes up most of your meal list. You're going to go to the grocery store, you're going to buy those things and only those things, and then you're going to prepare them, especially for when meals that you're not going to be able to cook at the time of, your lunch, possibly your breakfast, things like that. And then you're going to eat those meals throughout the week. Now, when you get to the weekend, you have a little bit more flexibility with time. You can prepare things a little bit more fresh. This is also when, maybe I do have a meal out with the family. Because again, it's not about being super restrictive. It's about making the right choices most of the time. Not realistic to say you're never going to go out to eat. You're never going to have that ultra processed food. That's why I talked about 80-20. But most of us are living more like 40% whole natural foods, 60% ultra processed convenient type foods. So we really need to shift that ratio if you want to accomplish your goals. So to wrap this up, knowing what an ultra processed food is, how to identify it, and again, that's the long ingredient list, the long packet or shelf life. Those are two really big indicators. But again, just asking yourself, could I find this in nature? If not, then it's probably not the food that you want to be eating a ton of. This is super important, especially for people who find themselves overeating, have huge energy crashes throughout the day, are in a fat loss plateau, meaning they feel like they're doing the right things, but they still can't lose the fat, or just don't feel as healthy as they feel they should for the amount of effort that they put in. And be careful, because even foods marketed as healthy can live in this ultra processed category, which means that they are engineered for you to overeat. While they might have more protein than some other options or more fiber than some other options, they still are kind of in that like junk food where they're easy to overeat. They don't provide a ton of value to us from a nutritional standpoint, other than they put protein on the packaging. And what this is all about really is simplifying your nutrition to make it easier and more simple to accomplish your health and fitness goals and just be a healthier version of yourself in general. So if you want to feel better, if you want to look better, and if you want to perform better, the easiest thing you can do with your nutrition, bar none, is focus on whole natural foods for the vast majority of your calorie intake. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me a message or comment on the video below. I hope you have a wonderful week filled with whole natural foods, and we will talk soon.